Beach in rural North Carolina, whose TED Talk has been viewed by over 750,000 people. Also with us are Mark Rembert and Taylor Stuckert, co-founders of Energize Clinton County. These guys have been turning things around in rural Ohio. Now, small towns are looking at reinventing themselves, reinvigorating hollowed-out downtowns, and reversing brain drain. Today, our guests are on the forefront of such innovations in rural America, jump-starting community development through their design projects. We're going to get to Emily's presentation and to Mark and Taylor's presentation in a few minutes, but first I have a few announcements. Community Matters monthly events are brought to you by the Orton Family Foundation. They are an ongoing series designed to help people and their communities take charge of their futures. This webinar is also brought to you today by the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. And they have a quick announcement. The Citizens Institute on Rural Design, or CIRD, recently selected 4 communities to host rural design workshops for the 2014 program year. We'd like to send out congratulations to Houston, Mississippi, Oregon County, Missouri, Franklin, New Hampshire, and Lancaster County, Nebraska. You can find out more about these communities and their workshop focus, along with resources for any community seeking to do more with rural design, on the CIRD website. And that website is rural-design.org, so rural-design.org. The Adobe Connect platform, I hope you all have up on your computer screens, allow us to follow along with the PowerPoint presentation and take your questions. Many of you have already sent in questions and shared your stories of success on the Community Matters website at registration. We want to thank you all who have participated in that way. Our speakers have reviewed those questions and will cover some of them during the webinar. Still, we'll leave about 20 minutes or so at the end for questions we may not have gotten to or new ones that come up during the program. A question and answer box will pop up for you to write in your questions. If you're having any technical problems, you can dial *0 for phone issues or email us at info@communitymatters.org. So, let's get on with the webinar. Our first guest speaker is Emily Pilloton. Ms. Pilloton is a designer and the author of Design Revolution, 100 Products That Empower People, and Tell Them I Built This, Transform Over the last several years, Project H has been growing an innovative school and community design program in Bertie County, North Carolina, which is the poorest and most rural county in the state. Ms. Pilloton's work has caught the attention of the national media and hundreds of thousands of fans through her TED Talk. In July, actually, she was also the cover girl on Make magazine. Of course, it was the cover story. Welcome so much, Emily.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, why don't you go on with your presentation?
Sure. Okay, so hi everyone. I can't see you or hear you, but you can hear me. So I just want to say thanks for dialing in. I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, and then if there are any questions, we can follow up with that in dialogue with Mark and Taylor also, who I just want to say, Mark and Taylor are dear friends of mine, and we've collaborated before and been PopTech fellows together, so I'm really excited to be in conversation with them also. So I'm just going to tell 2 really quick stories about projects that we have done. As Fran mentioned, the TED Talk and that specific project in Bertie County, North Carolina, was really my first experience working as an architect or a designer in a rural context, in an extremely rural context. And, you know, as a designer, all projects begin with context, whether you're designing a home for a very wealthy client or you're building a civic structure in the middle of nowhere, which is what we did in North Carolina. It all begins with context. So to give a little bit of background here, Project H is a nonprofit that I founded in 2008, and as you can see on this slide, the H stands for a lot of different things, but it really just grew out of my own belief and frustration with the traditional architectural practice of working on projects that, in my opinion, seem sort of disconnected from the things that matter to me, to community. There is a growing group of architects who are pushing for more equitable, more civic, more humanitarian practices in architecture that are looking at big social issues. But I started Project H feeling like, okay, I've been in the practice of architecture for 8 years, and I'm still designing doorknobs and plumbing fixtures. So I set up the nonprofit to try to bring my own practice in design back to things that I believed really mattered. And so this was in 2008. In 2009, I received an email from the superintendent in rural North Carolina, and Project H was about a year old at this point. And I put up this quote. This is sort of a teaser of the story I'm about to tell. I want to come back here with my kids someday and tell them I built this, which I'll get back to in a minute. But this is the man that had emailed me. His name was Dr. Chip Zollinger, and he emailed me having seen some of Project H's work, and he was the superintendent of this very, very poor, very low resource, very poor performing school district in eastern North Carolina, in Berkeley County, if any of you know it. And he just reached out and said, look, I'm trying to save this school district. It's as simple as that, and all of the things that we've done up until this point haven't worked, so I figured I would call some designers and see if, a more sort of revolutionary creative approach could fix some of the things that the district was struggling with. And Berkeley County is, I would like to say it's an exception, but I think it's probably pretty similar to a lot of other places in rural America. It's a very small town. It's or a very small county. The county seat of Windsor is like about 2,000 people, extremely, relatively poor, and definitely a huge racial rift between the black and white communities. The downtown of the county seat is really a ghost town. We've seen this a lot of different places where the whole downtown is basically empty and there aren't a lot of economic opportunities. So we got invited to come to Berkeley County, my partner Matt Miller and I, and we were invited really with carte blanche to just bring creativity and architecture and design and see what we could do to uplift and change and inspire the whole community, but specifically the students and the teachers and administrators working in this district. So I'll just share really briefly the story of one of my students. This is Karan, who you see here in the striped shirt. And, without telling the whole sob story, I think we know it already, but there are a lot of students in public schools who are not being served well. My computer just flipped out. Okay, there we are. So this is Karan. He's a great example of a kid who's incredibly smart, who is incredibly gifted and ambitious and has a lot of dreams for himself, and yet this school district is not providing him with all the opportunities to reach his full potential. So the thing that you see on the floor here, this is the first thing Karan had ever built in his whole life. So after working with Dr. Zollinger and coming to understand Berkeley County a little bit better, we decided that the best thing we could do as architects and designers was to become teachers and to teach what we know about architecture and what we know about creativity and what we know about community service within the context of a high school class. And so Karan was one of our first students. And the goal of this class was to design and construct a piece of public architecture for Berkeley County that was like physically built by the hands of students just like Karan. So this thing on the floor is Karan's design for, quote, the craziest chicken coop he could come up with. That was the challenge, to design the craziest chicken coop he could come up with. And through a lot of prototyping and modeling and tinkering, he started looking at some of the precedent of Buckminster Fuller and the geometries and how his architecture was put together. And then this is that piece of the chicken coop being raised up into the air. And eventually there's a MIG-welded steel structure that was put in place. And then this is the final chicken coop. And I'm showing this because, this is happening in a rural context. This is happening within a rural school district. And for Karan, this is pretty much the first time he's ever built anything that he's proud of and that has a sense of audacity to it. Like, whoever thought a chicken coop could look like that? And so for Karan, this is like a big wake-up call that things can be different. It's a moment where he's realizing things can be different, and he doesn't know exactly what that means yet, but he's seeing that in front of him, that the reality that he knows could be different. And this is the team that he built it with. So the second piece of the story is that, we did promise and say out loud to our students and to the community that we were going to build a piece of public architecture. And so now we have 13 students who are all 16, 17 years old and have very few skills in building or architecture, and we have to get them from 0 to 60 in about 4 months to design and construct a meaningful piece of architecture for the town. And as an architect, I believe this to be possible, but I've also never had a construction crew of 16-year-olds, so this is a huge task for us as instructors also. But we ran our class very much like a normal architecture studio. We went through a lot of design, a lot of research, and the thing that our students identified that was missing from their town and from the county and from the region was a farmer's market, which doesn't sound all that revolutionary in bigger cities, but it really was in a place like Berkeley County where the public health is very low, poverty is very high, it's a food desert. It made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And so this model that you see here is one of the students' first attempts to try to put some sense of form to the idea of a farmer's market. And I mentioned the idea of audacity in the context of the chicken coop, and this is a common thread that we push as an organization, that I push as an educator. Like, what is the most audacious version of the thing you're talking about? Is there like some shock value to doing something really extraordinary and really audacious that makes a statement to the whole community that, like, we can make things that are beautiful and unbelievably amazing? So that was a challenge we gave to our students. So here's Karan again, showing his architectural design to, this is one of he owns a bed and breakfast in downtown Windsor. And so I love this photo because here are two people who I can pretty much guarantee would never have met if it had not been for this project. And they're talking about it with the same sense of love and care and investment, that they both really want to see this thing come to fruition, whether for economic reasons, for academic reasons, or just for a love of the place that they come from. So over the course of the spring semester, we're working through this design with the students. They each have a design, and we eventually have to, like, cull it down into just one single design, knowing full well that we have a limited budget, we have a limited time frame, we have to build this thing in a flood zone and a hurricane zone, and with our construction crew of teenagers. So this is the sort of final model of what we decided to build. And it's nothing special. It's not that crazy looking, but it is a nod to the context. It's inspired by some of the local agricultural buildings. It has a sort of like double height roof that increases circulation, and it serves as a billboard to the town. So we refer to this design as vernacular sublime, that it was comfortable and familiar but elevated. So now we actually have to build this thing, and this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, we've designed this thing, people from around the whole county have seen it, they're expecting that it's going to be built, and now we have 3 months to actually build it. And for any of you who have ever dug a hole or worked with concrete or constructed anything, you know that it's difficult. It's hard to build anything, let alone a 2,000 square foot structure with teenagers in 110-degree heat in 3 months. So here we are digging the foundation, going through the whole process of prefabricating, disassembling, moving, and reassembling these trusses that eventually became the skeleton for the structure, and then raising these things into place and having our students stand there and look at them and realize, like, that started as a model on my desk, and now it's physically, like, really growing out of the ground as a living, breathing thing that the community is now embracing. So they hear my students going back to the basics of carpentry, precision and craft and care, and taking the time and effort to make sure that everything is perfect. And then putting up a siding on the side of the building. This would become the billboard for the front of the building. And then this is the final structure once it was completed. And the grand opening, where all of the townspeople, the vendors, the mayor came out and actually got to inhabit this building for the first time. And I have many more slides. I'm actually going to end with this because I wanted to say, you know, this was 1 year. What I just showed is a one-year project. It happened very, very quickly. But what I realized in doing this project in a rural context, well, I've realized many things, but these are my students at the opening ceremony, that as an architect, I do care about aesthetic. I care about detail. I care about how things look and how things work. But within the context of this small town and these students who have been so underestimated, what mattered was three things. One, especially for Karan, I'm looking at him in the striped shirt there in the front, that quote at the beginning was his. I want to come back here someday with my kids and tell them that I built this. And so here's this building that's gorgeous, that was an architectural record. It was designed by 17-year-olds. And here's a kid who identifies himself as the architect, and that he has an ownership not only in the building but in this place that he grew up in, really for the first time. So ownership and the ability that design has to create ownership, whether it's in the form of a building or a business or whatever. The second thing was audacity, that we easily could have said, oh, you want a farmer's market? Let's go put up some tables and some of those tents you buy at Home Depot and we're done. But no, there is something really beautiful to taking things to the most audacious level and saying, of course we're going to build a 2,000 square foot farmer's market with 17-year-olds. Why wouldn't we do that? And then the third thing is just leadership and having a champion. You know, I'm all for collaboration, but I also believe, and I don't say this to brag, I say this, you know, I believe this to be true about a lot of projects. I don't think this project would have gotten done if Matt and I had not been there to champion it. And whether it was Matt and myself or someone else, I do believe that a lot of rural projects need a champion. They need someone who's a little bit crazy, who will really swing for the fences and say the thing that people are afraid to say, and probably make some enemies along the way. I do think design is collaborative, and it should be, but the projects that I really admire and the initiatives that I really admire do have the voice of a champion and of a leader. And in some cases that was me, in some cases that was Matt, in some cases that was my students. But everyone around Berkeley County knew that this was a studio-age project. It was coming from our students and from us, and they were either on board or they weren't. So I'll just wrap up and say that I had another project I was going to show that is in a non-rural context, but I think I'm actually going to end with this. I mean, I'm obviously biased because I am a designer, but I really believe in the power of creativity and in the power of youth to be the creative leaders in small towns and small communities that seem under-resourced and yet have this amazing resource in our youth who are the bearers of creativity in a lot of cases. So I'm going to end with that. I could say a lot more, but I'm going to pass it off to Mark and Taylor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Emily. I know you have a lot more to say, and your other project, which I believe is the library, is also just as inspiring. This is an amazing project. I'm sure there'll be some questions, and we'll get back to those after Mark and Taylor's presentation. Thank you so much, Emily. Just a quick note, the Q&A is active now. If you have a burning question you want to put right there on the right next to the presentation. If you're having any issues, you can dial *0 or email us at info@communitymatters.org. Our next speakers are Mark Rembert and Taylor Stuckert. They are the co-founders of Energize Clinton County. In 2008, they founded this organization in response to the announced loss of nearly 9,000 jobs in the develop community-based initiatives that engage citizens in the process of economic development and to promote local ownership, individual responsibility, and commitment to place. Their work has included the piloting of innovative community energy efficiency programs in partnership with the University of Dayton, a successful Buy Local First campaign, and the establishment of a Fellows program to address the rural brain drain. Among other recognitions, Rembert and Stuckert have been the 2009 Pop Tech Social Innovation Fellows, and also their 5-part strategy was awarded the 2013 National Planning Achievement Award for Innovation in Economic Planning and Development by the APA, the American Planning Association. Mr. Rembert also serves as the director of the Wilmington-Clinton County Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Stuckert is the associate director of the Clinton County Regional Planning Commission. Welcome, Taylor and Mark, and please go forward with your presentation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. This is Mark. I'm going to start out, and we're going to kind of tag team this presentation. But thank you so much to the Orton Family Foundation and Community Matters for having us, and thanks to Emily for always inspiring us. It's been amazing to be able to know Emily for many years and to engage with her through her work and Birdseed and beyond. And I always, whenever I hear your story, Emily, I'm always inspired. So thank you for that. We are going to talk a little bit about, I guess, community or design from the standpoint of community development. Taylor and I do not come from a design background. Everything we know about design, we've sort of picked up on the streets, and so we sort of applied it where we see it as very beneficial, which is in a lot of different contexts. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some examples that are related to the design of the built environment, so sort of what we might consider our traditional community design, but then also how we try to apply design principles or a design approach to other aspects of our work in areas that may be more relatable to people who don't come from an architecture design background. I imagine a lot of people on the call are probably not coming from that kind of background. So we're going to offer some examples of other ways that you might be able to apply a design approach to your work and where we see it as important and valuable to do so. So I'll turn it over to Taylor to start. First, we're going to, as I said, we're going to kind of cover 3 areas: design for investment and looking at the way that design can help to facilitate community investment, especially in the built environment. Design for action, so how do we use design to inspire action or change behaviors in the community? And then finally, looking at ideas for how do we design programs, especially, and I assume probably many people working in a rural context can share the challenges that we've had of working in areas that don't have great access to resources, whether those be public resources or philanthropic resources to fund community development initiatives. So how do we design programs that maximize impact with heavy resource constraints? So I will turn it over to Taylor.
Great. And again, thanks to the Orton Foundation for having us on this call. We're always excited to kind of share ideas and have discussions around the things that make us passionate about what we do. So, Mark and I, we, as Fran mentioned, our projects kind of vary in focus, and we've always had kind of 5 key areas, and we're going to kind of touch up on 3 of those areas. One being, visioning for community, and then, of course, we'll talk about buy local and as well as about youth development and kind of the people, the community. And so the reason for visioning, as Mark mentioned, neither of us are really from a design background, but both of us have an interest in design. I come from an urban planning background, and so working with the Planning Commission, visioning and planning is a core component of our work. And one of the other things that I feel like we do well as an organization is identifying partners and resources that will help us accomplish the projects we want to accomplish. And one of those, as Emily is, are architects. Architects are very useful in helping people vision the possibilities for the built environment. And so for design for investment and our visioning efforts, really that's always been our goal, is how do we help people see the possibilities for the community, whether they be in the built environment, the local economy, or helping attract young professionals to our community. So for the visioning project, we have a couple examples to offer, and the first is this project we undertook a few years ago. We had an architecture student who had just recently graduated from college and was looking for an opportunity to do some work in the community, and he knew Mark from the past, and really for us it was just identifying what is a useful project for him to do. And so basically it started out with, we'll just send some letters to some downtown building owners, and we'll offer them free architectural services. We'll offer them the opportunity to see renderings of their buildings, should they invest in them and restore facades or renovate the interior. So we sent letters to downtown building owners, and we had one case, and this example was a building owner who was really enthusiastic about the idea of receiving a rendering for free, and even went so far as to implement the improvements that were offered by the architect. And really for us, these kinds of projects like Emily's farm market as well kind of serve as a catalyst for the community. When people can see sort of physical changes or tangible changes, tangible results of projects, I really think that it's a starter for momentum and demonstrates investment and improvement in the community. And certainly for our downtown, having a win like this, where you have an enthusiastic building owner who takes you up on that offer of doing a rendering and then actually implements those changes, serves as a catalyst in our downtown. And the second example of that was we really wanted to take the similar approach in the project and offer it to a wider audience. So really the goal with this was to get citizens inside the buildings and to allow them to see the unique perspectives that historic structures offer, whether they be, in a small town, a tall structure, so unique views of the community, or just the history that the building has and the stories that people have about these spaces and the memories they have, and really get people inside and generate that energy around these spaces. So a project we did with the same architect was a downtown loft tour. And for this tour, we had a number of buildings, and we contacted the owners, and we wanted to organize a tour for citizens so that they could go inside the buildings and see the spaces. And, like I mentioned, part of the goal was to get people just, re-interested in these spaces. And we know people have a long history with these buildings and the businesses that used to be there. So just getting them inside was the initial goal. But also with the architect and the architectural resources, the goal was to show them the possibilities for these spaces. To show them the opportunities from an economic perspective on investing in historic infrastructure and downtown loft apartments, but also just allowing them to see the possibilities of reusing these spaces, so the different types of uses that they might not have imagined in these spaces. And the program really did kind of serve as that catalyst. And since that tour, we saw actually almost all the buildings that were on our tour, and I think we had about 10, have been renovated since the tour. We had one that was already under renovation prior to the tour, but really getting people inside the buildings did generate really an all-time high amount of energy about the downtown and historic properties, at least in our lifetime. And, I think that one of the key results from the project, and one of the key things I've seen from the Planning Commission standpoint, and we're going through the process of updating the city comp plan in Wilmington, and I've been doing a lot of charrettes and meetings with individuals throughout the community. And one thing that has been absolutely unique and different talking to people today than it was when I was growing up in Wilmington was the interest in downtown and the priority that physical development of the community has, to everyday citizens. And that's certainly something that did not exist just a few years ago, when we were kind of at an all-time high in economic activity and prosperity with DHL. So, I'll pass it on to Mark. But, we offer, through all our projects, we have a number of different websites. And for the visioning piece, you can go to imagine.energizecc.com, and we keep it pretty up to date with all the different plans. The loft tour that I described is on the website, as well as all the community plans that we've been working on.
All right, so to change pace a little bit, I want to talk about how we've applied design to motivate community action and to try to influence behavior. When we started our work in 2008, there was a sort of grassroots movement in the community to start a buy local campaign. This was at the depths of our local recession, and there was a clear need to support local businesses, and which was interesting because during our years of prosperity preceding 2008, there had not been really any focus on local businesses, but in the midst of a recession, people began to see that our local businesses play such a vital role in our community. So early on in the campaign, we were sort of recruited, and when it started, it was just this poster campaign. This is the poster that was hung up in storefronts. And we were sort of hired by the Planning Commission to take this campaign and grow it. And we sort of approached it as if we were a marketing firm, and we're trying to think of how we could build something like a collective brand, because we recognized that most of our local businesses were competing in the end with large national chains that had huge marketing budgets, that were advertising on TV and radio all the time. And so consumers were being bombarded with advertising from many of the competitors of our local businesses, but many of our small businesses weren't doing any marketing of their own, didn't have brands, didn't have websites. And so we kind of looked at the campaign as a way of bringing them all under one umbrella and providing some of these marketing services collectively. So we did a lot of focus grouping and surveying early on to try to understand who our target audience was, what it was they were looking for. And we took this brand, which was, we didn't really find it so inspiring, and worked on redeveloping it to be a little bit more appealing from a design perspective. One of the things that we did, again, realizing that we needed to find a way to connect our local businesses with consumers, was we built a very robust email marketing campaign, which again, we put a lot of resources into the design of our marketing and our email campaigns, realizing that we had to be competitive in our message to cut through a lot of the noise that consumers were hearing on a regular basis from larger chains or national brands. And so we wanted to make sure that when we put out materials, they were as slick as they could be and as close to looking like they were professionally done. We're far from professional, but we do mindfully go about the design of our materials to appeal to consumers. We've, over time, through partnership with the businesses that are part of the campaign, built an email database of nearly 5,000 consumers in our community. We send out once a week a buy local email on various topics. So 1 week it'll be events from local businesses, 1 week it'll be coupons from local businesses, 1 week it'll be a feature of a local business, and then we also do this, we have this Lego man that travels around to local businesses, and we run a contest around identifying where he is, which is a way of engaging consumers. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of our small businesses did not have a website presence, and so we invested heavily in developing a website that was interactive and appealing to consumers, that would give our small businesses some presence online. So this is a screenshot of our website. This was an area that we had no background in and just sort of had to teach ourselves. And, we were doing it at a time when there weren't a lot of resources to learn how to code, but now there's so many resources online to learn how to build websites or code or things like that. We always say to people, it's one of the most important skills you can have if you're doing community development, knowing how to build a really nice website. And to us, this has been a really core part of the services that we've delivered small businesses in our community, but also delivered to consumers in our community to make sure that they're connected and tied in and are able to quickly find our local businesses. So you can find more info about that at buylocalcc.com. That's our Buy Local website.
Okay, and so the final kind of I guess, topic for us is program design. And so I guess we didn't get into some of the details about Wilmington, but Wilmington's a town of 12,000, and we're a rural community, and like many rural communities, there's usually this issue or obstacle of access to resources. We're not a wealthy community. We aren't known for our philanthropic giving, so I'd say we face as many challenges as many other communities do in terms of gaining resources. And so program design has been something for us that we've always viewed as critical to our work, and the ability to kind of stretch the value of the limited resources that you have. And so, like many other rural communities, an issue we face is the loss of young professionals and what many refer to as brain drain. And really, for our community, this started to take the turn for the worst at our most prosperous economic years, which, for us isn't that ironic, given that, as Fran mentioned, we had lost several thousand jobs, but most of those jobs were low-skilled jobs at an air park sorting cargo freight. And really the sort of unintended consequence of that type of economic cluster that we had in our community was that we saw a disincentive for further education. We saw the loss of high-wage earners in the community, and many of our young people, after graduating from college, did not feel that they had sort of professional opportunities here and moved on. So we certainly have seen, drops in educational attainment and all sort of the indicators that go along with brain drain. And so a few years ago, 5 years ago to be exact, we had a group of students college students who were home for the summer who wanted to be involved in community development and working in the community. For us, it was really just how do we find a way to plug these students in? How do we get them, involved and find sort of project opportunities for them? And then, for that next summer, we were thinking, man, we have all these young people who come home from college during the summer, some who are recent graduates, and it's really kind of a critical point in their lives when they're thinking about moving on to another community. Where am I going to live after college? What's the cool city to move to? It's a critical moment in which to capture their attention and sort of broaden their perspective of the community, and also give them some professional networking opportunities to help sort of incentivize their return to the community, either following college or one day later on in life. So we started this Clinton Community Fellows program, and we just finished last week the 2014 program. And, really, as I mentioned, the program was founded in 2010, and we've had 20 fellows. And the focus of the program, beyond just kind of giving them work, is to also sort of further the work that we're already doing in the community. So we match them with businesses or organizations in the community, small businesses, nonprofits, and we basically set them up for project work for 10 weeks in the summer. And very early on, we realized that to be competitive as a fellowship, to get these young people to look at this program rather than maybe a job in retail or working at Subway, we had to find a way to pay them. And so every year we've focused on fundraising for this program to basically raise enough money to pay each fellow $2,000 stipend. And the amount of fellows we take in for the summer is usually based on how much money we raise. And we've had a solid group of businesses in the community that invest in this program, and really the program runs on kind of a pay-it-forward mode. So businesses will receive services from the students in design, in business development, social media strategies, website development, really a lot of these skills that kind of come natural to these young students and are things that many business owners lack the capacity for. And so the other component to the program, which is part of the design structure that we have, is that it's not an admin-heavy program. And, we would say that during that 10 weeks, we've spent less than 20 hours of staff time working on the program. We set the program up to where these young professionals are viewed as contractors, and their matches are their clients. So, they're really managing their own time, they're managing their own projects, and, it's a great opportunity and experience for them. And so really the focus of, the program and many of our other programs is to be no larger than it really needs to be. As a small community, you really have to kind of leverage the resources you have and let it grow from there. And for us, and I think for Emily as well, and I hope it's kind of one of the themes that's taken from this talk, is that, you know, a core piece of our work is doing things, and it's not just thinking about it or you're naming every obstacle that's going to prevent us from doing it. And so if we have to scale it back and we have to do it small, we do it small. And then we hope that we can refine it and we can develop it and we can grow it. But the point is that the lack of resources or the inability to meet long-term goals of resources shouldn't ever be a hindrance to projects. So, you know, we kind of take that mindset in how we design our programs and allowing us to be able to continue to do innovative things in our community. And so, if you want more information, obviously we didn't have time to cover all the different projects we're working on, but EnergizeCC.com covers pretty much all our projects. You can learn more. You can contact us if you have any more questions beyond the webinar. So I guess with that, we'll turn it back over for questions.
All right. Mark and Taylor, thank you so much. This terrific, very practical, very hands-on, inspiring stuff here, too. I'd like to get to some of the questions. We've had a number that fall into similar categories. First off, Emily, we had just right off the bat about 3 or 4 questions. How did you fund the farmers market?
Yeah, so apologies for my condensed storytelling. I feel like there's a lot of things I probably missed. It was such a very complex project and story, and so I'm sorry I left that out. The farmers market, well, I should say first of all that, you know, we are a nonprofit, and our funding comes from a jigsaw puzzle of many sources, and it's usually a combination of private foundation funding, individual donors, some corporate in-kind donations, and corporate sponsorships. And then for the past 5 years, or 4 years, we've been lucky to be a National Endowment for the Arts grantee in their artworks design program. So the farmers market in particular was the same sort of jigsaw puzzle of funding, but primarily funded by one grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and then a lot of like scrappy local fundraising, and Project H is also very lucky to have a global network of supporters that range from like my grandmother to people around the world who've just heard about us and want to support this type of design. So the total amount of brick and mortar costs for the physical structure was about $55,000 or $60,000, and then we also paid our students a stipend, a summer work stipend, and then we also built out our entire classroom shop ourselves out of our own. The school district did not give us a single dime, including our salaries. So we worked for free for a year, and we did the entire project.
Thank you. Well, so there's some work certainly to be done there. Another set of questions that came in was about changing the mindset of some intransigent and developer-oriented local councils. You know, how do you move them to create innovative and citizen-driven design processes? And kind of in that, somebody else, kind of what is your response to someone who says design standards are too much burden on property owners? So how do you work at shifting attitudes to be more open to some of the work that you are doing? Any tips?
This is Mark.
Yes.
Go ahead. Emily, you go first.
No, I was just going to say one thing, and I'm sure you guys have far more experience in this. I don't know, that's maybe an oversimplified answer, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying about having a champion. I think there are a lot of great case studies of small towns that have had like one really brave or audacious project that's tipped the scale, where that's been visual and physical, where people, like you said, Taylor, once things become tangible and people can look at them, they go, oh, like that, we get it. Like, let's do more of that. So I think sometimes it only takes one project. And I'll just say about the farmers market, you know, that was the first new structure built in God knows how many decades. And I could tell all kinds of horror stories about some of the stubborn leaders in Berkeley County. But after the farmers market was built, a lot of those historical social and political structures started to become dismantled. I mean, there's a citizen-run management system for the farmers market. Two of the school board members who were like staunchly opposed to our entire program were voted out. There's a new county commissioner who's incredibly progressive, and not to say that we caused all that, but I certainly think the conversation that surrounded the audacity of the farmers market gave permission for other people to stand up and say, okay, well, if they can do that, then I can do this, or I can buy that building downtown and open a bakery or whatever the thing is. So I think there is a ripple effect for sure.
Great. And Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to sort of reinforce some of the same things. Taylor talked a little bit about he showed the building that the building that we featured on the Loft Tour portion. That building, along with maybe 5 or 6 others, have been purchased and renovated by one person in our community. And I think going back to that need for a champion, it took a long time for that person to emerge. But once they did, that entire block where that building was has now been renovated by various building owners. But it took one person sort of signaling to the market. I mean, in the end, a lot of this is market-driven. When you're talking about renovating buildings, it's market-driven. You're going to put money in, and you're going to hope to get money out. And, we had sort of one wealthy person that was willing to take some risks, and that has sparked a lot of investment. So I think, obviously there are a lot of cases where, like, broad community engagement in design is really valuable and important. But in some cases, it's about finding one person who's able to make a move and cultivating that person and encouraging them to invest. And that person, the person who's taken that leadership in our community, was on our Loft Tour. I like to think that he probably saw that there were a lot, we had 200 people show up for that tour, which signaled that there was a lot of interest in these downtown spaces, and that was encouraging to him to start buying up buildings and renovating them. So I think that, and then as Emily also said, if there are people, especially in the public sector, standing in the way, you got to just get people to run for office and change that. Taylor and I, when we started Energize Clinton County, we were very marginal in the community. We were totally the radical outsiders trying to push change from the outside, even though we're from the community. But slowly but surely, we've sort of found ways of bring our work into established institutions. So, 3.5 years ago, I became the director of the Chamber of Commerce, which gave a new platform for us to advocate and communicate some of these values and this vision. Taylor's now the assistant director of the Regional Planning Commission. That's a different platform. So we haven't been afraid to, sometimes you can get very tied into the first organization like ECC. This is the only way to do things. We've tried to be flexible and find ways that we could entrench ourselves in other more established institutional organizations to push change.
Great. Yeah, you are the new leadership. It's fantastic. Another very interesting question came in from Missouri that Maria Sykes, the co-director of the Epicenter in Green River, Utah, I think might have a very interesting answer to. So the question is this. Do you have any insights about how the culture of rural places plays a role in the process of citizen engagement and space design? And so I'd like to hear our guests answer that also. But Maria Sykes, are you on the line?
Yeah, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, terrific. So, tell us about how the culture of rural places really plays a role in design.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Epicenter, which is located in Green River, Utah, which has a population of only 953 people, we have a lot of insight, I would say, into the culture of, this specific rural place. And I think, a common mistake that people make is that, like in this line of work, that they assume that there's some sort of formula for working in a rural place, and like they think that all rural places are the same. And I can tell you from personal experience that rural Alabama, where I'm from, is completely different from rural Utah. And so just because a specific process or project works here in Green River doesn't mean that it would, work anywhere else in the country necessarily. So I feel like I have a lot of insights to the rural culture of Green River, but it doesn't necessarily mean that applies kind of anywhere. So not to necessarily dodge the question, but I would say that the insight that I would provide would be a lot of what Mark and Taylor and Emily have said, is that you have to live and work, from within this rural context. You have to commit to this place. You have to get in a relationship with this place. You have to go to city council meetings. You have to substitute teach at the high school. You have to go to the basketball games. You have to get on the planning commission. You got to play flag football with the local teenagers. You have to make real, genuine connections with the people, and then you start to be a part of the culture yourself. So I think wherever you're working, if it's a rural place or not, you need to be a citizen of where you are. You need to actively participate in the culture. And if you're not willing to kind of commit to that place or that culture, you really have no business working there. So,
thank you so much, Maria, for joining us. We knew that you would have a succinct answer to thinking about how culture really plays a role in design. Mark, Taylor, or Emily, any additions that you have about the culture of a place on your work?
Yeah, this is Taylor. I would also add to that, I completely agree with everything that was just stated. For us, I think we often benefit from being here, being from Wilmington. I mean, one thing that's unique to the culture of Wilmington is that historically it's a Quaker community. And Quaker culture is a unique challenge to many people. It's a very passive-aggressive and a kind of a quiet culture. So navigating that is very challenging, and connecting with that is a challenge. But what I might add, too, is that the thing that we feel that is critical for the future of the community is finding ways to involve what many would call outsiders to the community in the city and the activities that are taking place. I think one thing that small communities often struggle with is kind of accepting, while we're very welcoming and nice and happy, there is kind of a sense of exclusivity to people that are new to the community. And I think a lot of that is just understanding the historic culture of the community, but also finding ways to engage new people and finding ways to get them involved in the planning commission and volunteering, and understanding really the rhythm of the community and what it takes to be an engaged citizen.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that one? Or I'll move on to a next burning question for folks. Okay. This is such an interesting topic. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but we'll hit this one. So this question came in a lot of different ways. How do you engage various communities when you have a small town? So how do you engage the arts and design community? How do you engage the building community, the carpenters? How do you involve elders?
How do you involve the old people that are stubborn?
The old people that are stubborn. How do you involve them in your projects?
I guess I'll take this one. I think a big part of our work has been in storytelling, and as a designer, that's sort of natural to, like, everything we do is in a way storytelling. But I think obsessive documentation and sharing of that documentation is really, really important. Like, over the course of the Farmers Market project, we actually were lucky enough to have a documentary film crew who was there to, like, apply on the wall the entire project, and so they helped us both tell the story and then also hold up a mirror to us so that we could reflect on what we were doing. But I think in, like, constantly sharing those things with the community, whether that was, like, calling the newspaper and saying, we're breaking ground on the foundation today, or having, a Twitter or a Facebook feed that we're just constantly updating, or a blog, or just constantly producing and sharing information in various mediums, digitally, analog, brick and mortar, having events downtown, telling the story and having our students tell the story. In a small town, it doesn't take long for everyone to find out what's going on. So I think that's actually an asset of a rural community, that if you're doing something different, like, people are going to know about it really fast. And so it's a matter of storytelling and how you tell that story in a way that says to people, like, doesn't matter who you are, there's a way for you to be involved and invested in this.
Great, Emily, thanks. Mark or Taylor, other thoughts about engaging various parts of your community?
Yeah, I think we agree that, one of the benefits of working in a small community or rural place is that you have a lot of baked-in social networks that should be pretty easy to engage. I mean, whether or not they want to engage or whether they want to participate is another thing, but at least letting them know what's going on is pretty easy. I mean, I think we definitely take this might, kind of being of the social network generation, I think we are very attuned and explicitly aware of sort of how networks work in our community and who the kind of network connectors are and who if we talk to this person, who's going to know about it. That we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about those issues, and it's important, I think, to be aware of those things to be really effective. And you can sometimes more effectively communicate if you just talk to the right person as opposed to talking to every person, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Another question that before we get to the last one is Paul was interested in how he can see the library project. I know, Emily, that was a part of your presentation that you didn't get to. I think he's particularly interested in the library. Can he go to your website or something to see that project?
Yeah, if you go to, I'm trying to remember. So the two-sentence description is that we actually moved our design build program to a school in Berkeley, California, which is totally not rural. It's the exact opposite. And we did that in order to prove, or maybe prove to ourselves or test, that design can make a significant difference in both ends of the spectrum, at the super rural and the super urban, and hopefully everything in between. So the library project is actually a school library. It was designed and built by our 8th grade students, and they built it for the school as their class gift, and it was beautiful and like really emotional for them, and then they graduated and left it behind. So the name of the library is called the X Space, the letter X Space. So if you go to Realm, REALM, xspace.org, we actually launched it as a Kickstarter campaign and raised $78,000 to build it. You'll see all the images and all the there's some video and renderings of the space that are all there.
Terrific. Okay, and the last question that we like to ask at the end of these sessions is what folks can do next week just to get going. So what would you recommend? Where do they begin with bringing some of these rural design concepts to their town? Mark or Taylor, you want to start us off?
Sure. I guess one of the cliche sayings is to not reinvent the wheel and just, identify what others are doing and how you might be able to adapt that to your local needs or your local issues, and really begin sort of understanding what it is you want to address and how you're going to go about doing it, and then really just getting at, just starting and being active.
Okay. Great. Emily?
Yeah, the best way to start is just to start. And I think also, this is the architect in me saying this, but I also love it when people do things that are out in the open and public and tactile and unexpected. And, I think one really great case study that I come back to all the time is Greensboro, Alabama. I know a lot of really talented, creative people that have worked there, and often the things that they started was just like a really simple, like, let's make pie. Let's go into a building downtown and make pie, or whatever it is. I don't think you need to overthink it. People are people, and they love pie, and there you go. That's a great way to get people talking to each other. So just do something, make it visible, make it fun, and don't be afraid to take on anything and everything, and to piss people off. If it's, people are going to be on your side sometimes and sometimes not. But I think that's a sign of progress, is stirring up the pot and really pushing for creative change.
Yeah, we always say if people aren't upset, you're not doing your job.
Is that a good final word? Was that Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay. I am a stickler for getting off on time, so I can't thank the three of you enough. Emily, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for facilitating.
And Mark, thank you. Mark Rembert.
Thank you.
And Taylor Stuckert.
Thank you.
from Ohio. This is a terrific and engaging session. And thank all of you for joining us today. A link to the recording of this webinar will be emailed to you and also made available at our website, www.communitymatters.org. I want to thank the Orton Family Foundation folks who produce and support these calls. This session was also co-sponsored by the Citizens Institute for Rural Design. We hope you take a moment to take the short survey that is right there on your page right now. And we hope you join us next time. We want you to know that the September Community Matters call is early in the month. It's on a Friday and at a new time. Coming right up in just a few weeks on Friday, September 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 on the West Coast, we'll discuss digital engagement with Alyssa Black and Pete Peterson with advice on online public engagement and considerations for selecting appropriate digital tools. So as Mark and Taylor talked about that social network generation, you might want to tune in and make sure you get what really gets them going. Watch for more information. This is Fran Stoddard for the Orton Family Foundation. Good luck with your rural community design projects, and see you next time. Bye-bye.